We're officially 24 hours away from kickoff at Lumen Field. The Seahawks opening their season against Russell Wilson and the Broncos on Monday Night Football. What do the Seahawks need to do to get the season opening victory and ruin Russell Wilson's homecoming? Nick Lee and I are going to be breaking it all down on our Sunday special pregame show of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks. Joining me for our Sunday special pregame edition of Locked On Seahawks, my co-host Nick Lee. Nick, glad to have you back. I know it's been a challenging couple weeks for you, and all of us here at the Locked On Seahawks family, all of our listeners, we are wishing for the best for your family. I know that it's been an extremely challenging time.
Thanks, Corbin. Yeah, I've been really humbled and uplifted by the outpouring of love and support for me and my family with my mom's untimely passing due to cancer. So thank you so much for everybody who's reached out. And it's been tough, but honestly, this is a time like this where sports can play a role in helping us pick back the pieces. I just a few days ago sat with my dad and watched Thursday Night Football on a new TV he just bought, and kind of saw some smiles on his face that have been few and far between lately. So sports can do stuff like that. So it's truly special, and I'm hoping that the Seahawks can put together a good game and help heal a little bit too. Just sports can bring people together and maybe at least temporarily heal wounds. So thank you so much once again for everyone who's reached out, and looking forward to getting back to hopefully a little bit of a normal routine.
And the Seahawks right now are half a game ahead of the Los Angeles Rams, at least for a few days, have a half-game lead in the NFC West over the defending champions. So a lot of good vibes going into this Monday night game. We're going to be devising a game plan for Seahawks victory, going to be dishing out our X factors for week one, and of course making our weekly predictions. Who's going to come out with the Monday night victory, all on a jam-packed Sunday episode. Now for your lead story here on Locked On Seahawks. When you're going into this season, week one, there's been a preseason, but many starters don't play in the exhibition games. So typically, this is when you're going to have the shortest injury list. But the Seahawks actually have a handful of players that are on their injury list heading into this game. Not many surprises here, Nick. Alton Robinson dealing with a PCL sprain in his knee, has not been practicing. Pete Carroll said on Thursday he wasn't ready yet, so he's already been ruled out. Tyler Ott, the long snapper, also ruled out. His shoulder popped out of place at practice, according to Coach Pete Carroll. He may need surgery to fix that, so that is a big storyline that we will have to pay attention to here in coming weeks. That could open up a roster spot. Carson Tinker is currently on the practice squad. He's going to get elevated to snap for this game. That is a fairly big injury going into this Monday contest, and we'll see what else we find out about Ott's situation moving forward. Artie Burns, with his groin issue being doubtful, has not been practicing for the better part of a month. Damian Lewis, Ken Walker III listed as questionable. Walker, I would still think they're probably trending towards holding him out. He hasn't done anything much really this week at practice. Boye Mafe, Sidney Jones, Ryan Neal, all were trending in the right direction with their respective injuries. Those three should be out there suited up for the Seahawks against the Broncos on Monday Night Football. Let's look at the players that are unlikely to play in this football game, Nick. In the backfield, Ken Walker III, rookie running back out of Michigan State, has been out for the last 3 weeks, missed the final 2 preseason games with a hernia procedure. He has done some stuff on the practice field this week, but it's looking highly unlikely he's going to be out there. And honestly, they shouldn't force the issue with the depth they have at running back. DJ Dallas and Travis Homer had really good preseasons. You got Rashad Penny ready to go. Don't force the issue with the rookie and give him another week or 2 weeks even before you unleash him in the backfield.
Yeah, 100%. There's absolutely no reason to rush him at all. Like you mentioned, Rashad Penny, RB1, who last year finished as one of the top, hottest running backs, if not the hottest running back in all the National Football League. So having him as long as Rashad Penny is healthy, he's going to be taking the bulk of the carries. And with the preseasons that DJ Dallas and Travis Homer had, I think that's that's a solid trio there to kind of carry the load. So you're not going to count on him or not going to count on Walker really, and don't need to. I think the biggest concerns are, at least for ones that aren't going to play, Artie Burns has been sidelined for about a month or so with the groin issue. Those darn soft tissue things, those will nag, and you don't. And it's a bummer because with who's coming to town and what kind of offense the Broncos can display, you really want all your corners, all your horses in the stable, so to speak. So Artie Burns is unlikely to play, I think, and we'll talk about Sidney Jones later as well, and two corners that you really like on the field.
Yeah, Artie Burns not being able to play in this game, it's a bummer for Burns because he had a really good start to training camp before he injured his groin. He and DK Metcalf had some epic battles on the practice field. You could see the comfort that he has with this defense now that he's got Sean Desai as an associate head coach. He played for him as the Bears defensive coordinator a year ago, played his best football down the stretch, had a really good game against DK Metcalf in Seattle late last season. So he had all that momentum and then pulls up lame, and they tried to get him back for the preseason finale. Didn't quite turn the corner, and he's still been sitting out. So maybe there's a chance that he plays, but with him not practicing, the way this has played out the last month seems unlikely he's going to be out there. There is some good news, though, Nick. A number of players that, even though they were limited at times during the practice week, Damian Lewis, all signs are pointing towards him having a real good shot to play after what looked like might be a season-ending ankle injury in that second preseason game. He's got a really good chance to go. Jake Curhan with his elbow issue, good depth for the offensive line at right tackle and both guard spots, having him available. And Sidney Jones, they're really working slow to get him back full practicing, but Pete Carroll has reiterated time and time again this week that he is ready to go. I know he's not listed first on their depth chart. It's Mike Jackson actually across from Tariq Woolen, but I would be stunned if Sidney Jones is not starting this game, especially against Russell Wilson, a quarterback of his caliber.
Yeah, like I mentioned, you want as all the horses in the stable for cornerbacks, and you got Russell Wilson and company with Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy coming in there. So Sidney Jones would be a huge boost to the secondary, especially with how young and somewhat inexperienced they are. Speaking of Damian Lewis, and that's, man, if you even just a few minutes, a few hours after that injury, if you would have told me he was be limited in practice with having a chance to play week one, I would have maybe said you're crazy, but sign me up. That would have been I would almost borderline miracle with how it looked. So that's awesome for him that he has a chance to come back so soon. That he really truly avoided maybe a career altering injury. So that was big for him. And of course, with Damian Lewis on the field, I think the Seahawks' best chance to win this game on Monday night, tomorrow night against the Broncos, it'll be by controlling the line of scrimmage, running the ball well, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Having long sustained drives and keeping Wilson on the sidelines and having a good running game. A lot of that will have to do with the health of the offensive line, and Damian Lewis is a big part of that.
They do have Phil Haynes behind him, so if they don't feel like he's quite there yet, Phil Haynes played really well in 2 starts late last season, plugging in at both guard spots. So they feel confident in him, but you would like to have all hands on deck playing a really good team like the Denver Broncos that stacked up favorably against the rest of the league in a lot of major defensive categories last year. This is not going to be an easy defense to move the football against. A couple other players that I think have a really good chance to play in this game. Ryan Neal's been out for most of the month of August going into September, dealing with a high ankle sprain, but he's been back on the practice field, at least from a special teams capacity. It'd be nice to have him in this game against a really talented Broncos team. And Boye Mafe, if Alton Robinson's not going to be there, you need the rookie to be available as a situational pass rusher that can turn up the heat on Russell Wilson, dealing with a shoulder strain, but it sounds like he is on the right track to be able to play in this game. Pete Carroll was really encouraged by the progress he made on the practice field this week. So I'd be surprised that he is not suiting up, especially given Alton Robinson's injury. Look for a lot of snaps for Boye Mafe on defense and special teams, and maybe a chance to make an immediate mark for the Seahawks on defense. Another rookie with a chance to play a lot of snaps right away.
Yeah, and it's nice with the Seahawks. I know they're not in the middle of the season where a Monday night game might be more advantageous, where you have an extra day. On this end, they have an extra day of rest, an extra day to get guys right for it being a Monday night game, even though it's to start the year and it's been a couple weeks since their last preseason game. So The fact that they're playing a week later than most of the league, I think, is advantageous in that fact, where maybe one of those guys like Ryan Neal or Damian Lewis, a guy that might need an extra day, or Boye Mafe, that could play a big role in getting them on the field. And you're going to need Boye Mafe as a situational pass rusher to make life miserable, or hopefully for Russell Wilson. But I think overall, I think it's generally a net positive in the injury news department.
Yeah, and hopefully they're going to have all those players we just mentioned that are trending upward. Hopefully all those players will be available for them in week 1. The season opener, you don't want to have very many guys sidelined by injuries because it's only going to go downhill from here. Guys are going to get banged up. You're going to have a lot more players in the injury report week 2 and on. So you'd like to have that clean bill of health as you'd expect to open up the regular season. We've got a big game coming up tomorrow night. What do the Seahawks need to do to win? Bringing back our Keys to Victory segment, we're going to be designing a game plan on offense and defense for the Seahawks to get the home upset and send Russell Wilson back to Denver with an unhappy homecoming at Lumen Field. We're going to get to that here in a moment. As you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. As a former site manager and current podcast host, I've made plenty of hires over the years, and LinkedIn has always been a go-to for me to find top candidates in sports media. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. It's simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. You're listening to the Sunday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Joining me for our pregame special, Nick Lee. Thanks to all the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We've been talking for months about this game. Russell Wilson. We found out when the schedulers, obviously, they had to take advantage of this opportunity. Russell Wilson going back to Seattle after being traded away, one of the best quarterbacks in football. We have to put this on the Monday night matinee and let a primetime audience see Russell Wilson come back to the Pacific Northwest. We've been talking this game up. Now we finally get to dive into creating a game plan. There's been so much chatter about what the crowd is going to be like with Russell Wilson and how his former teammates are going to respond, how his former coaches are going to respond, the emotion in the stadium. But now it's all about the X's and O's and what the Seahawks need to do on offense and defense to beat their former quarterback and his new team and come away with a season-opening victory. Nick, let's start on the offensive side of the football. What is the number one thing in your game plan that the Seahawks have to check off if they want to pull this home upset?
Well, with Russell Wilson now being in blue and orange on the other sideline, it's back to Pete Ball. And Pete Ball is ground and pound and play good defense. And first of all, ground and pound, keeping, controlling the ball, running the ball well. I thought it was very interesting. The Broncos were honestly a little bit all over the map as far as run defense. They're 17th last year in running yards and rushing yards allowed, and actually 27th in ESPN's run stop win rates in the NFL. But they were also tied for the league lead in least amount of rushing touchdowns allowed. So very interesting dynamic there. I think that they really were really good at tightening up in the red zone, perhaps. But overall, there looks like, and I think they're also, I think it was 17th or so, or 19th in rushing yards per attempt allowed. So there's some going to be, obviously there's some nuances with this being a different year, but a lot of the similar players on defense for the Broncos are there. And, there's going to be some opportunities to run the ball. And the Seahawks really that's going to be their primary source of attack. And like I mentioned in the first segment, this is how they're going to win the game. They're going to the Seahawks need to muck it up, to run well, control the clock, have long sustained drives, keeping Russell Wilson off rhythm and off the field on the sidelines. And that's going to come with a successful running game of ground and pound, staying on schedule, as they say, where, 1st and 10 turns into 2nd and 6, turns into 3rd and 2, that kind of thing. And that's going to come with a successful run game and blocking up front and getting and being on the attack, being on their toes and in attack mode on the offensive line. And Rashad Penny, we need to see that same Rashad Penny we saw early or late last year. If that same Rashad Penny, or maybe even a new and improved Rashad Penny, shows up, that is going to be a huge boost and swing in the Seahawks direction as far as advantage goes.
Yeah, I don't think that they can go into this game and do the 3 yards in a cloud of dust, or in this case, a cloud of rubber coming up from the turf. I don't think they can play that style. Not 1970s football. They're still going to have to throw it. They're going to have to be effective with setting up play action and things of that nature. But I think every offensive coordinator, you can speak from high school, college, Pee Wee League, whatever level, you're always looking, and I had an assistant I worked with for a long time that said this, and it always stuck with me. You're always looking for the rat that you can take advantage of on the field. And this is the NFL. Every one of these guys is a dynamic talent. These are the best of the best. But even the NFL, there are rats that you can exploit. And to me, the run game and the intermediate short passing game in the middle of the field can take advantage of the rats. I don't think that the Broncos have bad linebackers necessarily. Josie Jewell is a talented player. I loved how he played at Iowa, just kind of that gritty, hard-nosed player, really high football IQ, racks up tackles. But you can take advantage of him, and he's coming off of a significant injury. Jonas Griffith is coming off of a dislocated elbow he suffered during training camp. He might not be able to play in this game. We'll see. But that is the weakest link on this defense. And so I think if you can win up front and put your running backs in advantageous situations against those linebackers, that you can get some big chunk plays in the run game. And I think you can do some damage against those linebackers with the passing game, whether it's your running backs running routes against them or getting your tight ends involved. I think that that's going to be critical because this Broncos defense last year had the 5th fewest air yards that they allowed. They do not give up big plays downfield. That whole secondary is back. And Patrick Surtain II is only going to get better in year number 2. Justin Simmons is arguably the best safety in the entire NFL. Kareem Jackson's a really good player. Ronald Darby is a solid starter, and he's probably the weakest player of those 4. So this is a really good secondary. They don't give up very many chunk plays in the passing game. So you're going to have to be methodical, and I think part of that's got to be attacking the short to intermediate middle of the field in the passing game. Take advantage of those linebackers with your skill players, the running back, tight ends, your slots. Take advantage of that. I think that that is the key to them sustaining drives, moving the ball on 3rd down. That, with the run game being a heavy component, gives you the best chance to have ball control and put points on the board.
Yeah, and some of that might be with with patience, because with it, you get a little itchy when all you can do is do the mesh routes underneath and kind of carve up the linebackers a little bit, get 6-7 yards on a pass play. And if you do that long enough, or if you do that and don't really get downfield a lot, you start to get a little trigger happy. But yeah, that secondary is maybe one of the better secondaries as a whole in the NFL. Certainly those 2 safeties, Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons, very formidable safety duo. Yeah, Patrick Surtain, a very talented young corner. They have a chance to be extremely good as a unit in the secondary defensive backs. And, Justin Simmons, since 2020, is tied for the lead in the NFL in the interceptions by safeties with Quandre Dix. So the 2 most intercepting safeties in the NFL in the last 2 seasons are on the field, or will be on the field Monday night. So Justin Simmons is an extremely talented safety. So yeah, you don't want to take too many chances. Don't want to put the ball in harm's way, because that's another way with how, we believe that, the Seahawks certainly have a disadvantage, let's be honest, at the quarterback position in this game. And one way you can lose a game real quick like this is to put the ball in harm's way over and over again, because this team knows how to make you pay.
I think you've also got to finish drives when you have what's considered the weaker quarterback in Geno Smith going to this game. When you do get into the red zone, whether it's running the football, getting your tight ends involved, DK Metcalf with his size, whatever you got to do, you got to finish. And that was really hard to do against the Denver Broncos last year. You mentioned some of those rushing statistics. They only gave up 9 touchdowns, tied for the fewest in the NFL on the ground, even though their other run defense numbers were average to poor across the board. They really tightened things up in the red zone. 48.8% red zone rate, and that's less than half the time they gave up touchdowns. They were in the bottom 5 in the NFL. So they were really tight, and the red zone did not give up a lot of points. They were stingy down there. So Seattle's got to find a way. If they get inside the 20, at least get field goals, but you really need to turn at least a couple of those drives into touchdowns when you get into the red zone. Getting just 3 points in a game like this where you're the underdog isn't going to cut it. You got to be efficient there. You got to be efficient on third downs. Denver was actually one of the weaker defenses last year in the league on third down. So you may be able to sustain drives that way, but you get down inside the 20s, Geno Smith, Rashad Penny, whoever it is, somebody's got to step up and you got to score points. Now, let's go to the defensive side of the football now. As far as developing a game plan, when you're playing against Russell Wilson, just like Pete Carroll said on Thursday, as a coach, he's never more prepared for a quarterback than he is going up against Russell Wilson because he coached him for 10 years. We've been watching Russell Wilson for 10 years. We know the strengths. We know his perceived weaknesses. And the one thing you absolutely cannot allow number 3 to do is destroy you with extended plays. You can't let him get out of the pocket frequently and add an extra second or two for his receivers to work open and put more stress in the secondary. They're already going to have tough matchups against the receivers with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. The Broncos have some studs on the outside with a much improved quarterback now throwing to them. You can't give him those extra precious seconds to be able to create on broken plays as he's done so masterfully for the last decade for the Seahawks. So you got to keep him inside, and you got to be somewhat passive with your pass rush. You want to be aggressive, but you don't want to get too upfield because Russell Wilson can still burn you stepping up into the pocket and taking off as a scrambler. And so you've got to find that balance. To me, that is huge because a lot of the explosive plays for the Seahawks over the years have happened on those extended plays. You let Russell Wilson do that frequently, he is going to toast your secondary, even with the improved personnel the Seahawks expect to throw out there this year.
Yeah, that is a tough balance because we also know that Russell Wilson throws one of the better, if not the best, deep ball in the NFL. And if you give him enough times, enough chances to look downfield and attempt those, he's going to burn you. And, with what we've seen, that those times that the Seahawks fans have yelled at the screen at Russell Wilson in frustration, it's because he's been holding onto the ball too long, or he tries to make, one more spin move out of pressure and it turns a 2nd and 8 into a, 3rd and 17. And we saw that a few times over the years. And that's, keeping your gap integrity and not rushing too far upfield and giving him those lanes, but make him feel boxed in, make him, get a little jittery and try to do too much and be the hero. Cause we know Russell Wilson loves to do that and wants to play hero ball. And unfortunately, sometimes that was to his detriment with the Seahawks. He tried to do a little too much. And honestly, he's not as mobile as he once was. But even he's going to try to do it. And at times, he still can effectively. But this certainly isn't, 2012 to 2016 Russell Wilson we're talking about. So there is that happy medium where he's going to be, maybe more prone to throw the ball downfield or throw it away than try to run it. But, keeping your gaps and making him feel boxed in. Don't let him get outside and get to those explosive plays downfield. And try to get those, finally get to turn it around where you are the ones that are maybe cheering on as Russell Wilson takes a sack for 9 yards in the backfield.
Yeah, that certainly is something worth considering here is that Russell Wilson, at soon to be 34 years of age, he doesn't think that his play is declining. And I don't know necessarily that across the board that his play is declining, but you're getting older, your athleticism is going to start to diminish. And we have seen that the last few years, but he's still dangerous enough. And we saw it at times last year with his ability to get outside the pocket or step up in the pocket and do damage. That's still something that you absolutely have to account for as a defense. Speaking of getting after Russell Wilson, maybe the thing I am most intrigued by that we didn't get to see in the preseason, how is Clint Hurt going to use Jamal Adams? And I think this is a statement game to pull out some of those tricks, maybe all the tricks with Jamal Adams. He's always been such a good pass rusher, the best pass rushing safety out there. And last year, he was so predictable. Offenses knew when he was coming, and Ken Norton Jr. did not do a good enough job mixing looks up. But the Seahawks, I expect, are going to play Adams as a second linebacker in sub packages. He's going to blitz some in the A gap and the B gap. It's not just going to be blitzing off the edge. They are going to find different ways to get him involved. And I think this is a game. When you're playing Russell Wilson, I actually think mixing in an occasional delayed blitz with a safety can be a real weapon for you, especially with how long he holds onto the football, looking for those deep balls down the field. A guy like Jamal Adams, if you can find ways to mix in some regular blitzes and some delayed blitzes, give him a little bit of freedom on when he does that, I think you could get a big quarterback hit or two, maybe a sack mixed in there, maybe 2 sacks mixed in there when Adams gets going. Because Russell Wilson, his propensity to hold on to the football, Jamal Adams has the athleticism to be able to run after him, chase him down, and bring him down. I think Jamal Adams absolutely is one of the key factors in this football game, how the Seahawks use him, because he can be that spy that can really cause problems for a player like Russell Wilson with his athleticism and his unicorn of skill sets.
And frankly, the trade value of Russell Wilson versus what the Seahawks gave up to acquire Jamal Adams is a little scarily similar. So you want to have Jamal Adams produce and make life miserable for that quarterback that you traded away. And, I think priority number one when Clint Hurt was promoted and named defensive coordinator was, how are you going to use Jamal Adams? And this is going to be a great opportunity, a great first test, because now you're playing against a guy who you gave up or you traded away for a king's ransom. Now you use the guy that you paid a king's ransom for to make his life miserable. So hopefully that's kind of been, one of the priorities that they've made. Another one as well, Pete Carroll and that defensive staff have had a front row seat to Russell Wilson and his strengths and his weaknesses. And we've seen, a few like the coverages that can give Russell Wilson fits, the 2 safety high, some of the cloud kind of coverages that really have, Russell Wilson's always looking for that deep ball, which I said, he's got one of the better ones in the game, but to his detriment, sometimes he tries too hard to wait for those or to look for those and doesn't settle for the underneath or the checkdowns. And if you can maintain that kind of coverage, that's when you can get Russell Wilson in trouble.
Yeah, I think schematically, Russell Wilson can get the job done against 2 deep looks. Let's not act like this is completely his kryptonite. But at the same time, the stats in the film don't lie. He has been rendered much more ineffective when it comes to throwing downfield when teams have been able to mix in cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, sometimes cover 7. I expect the Seahawks will be sprinkling that in, especially out of their sub packages and cloud coverages. You've got to do a good job of mixing and matching those. And sometimes you can go into robber, but start off in 2 deep looks. There's all kinds of different stuff you can do. And that's been one of the themes. How can we disguise? It's not necessarily trying to be tricksters all the time, but you've got to find ways to keep Russell Wilson on his heels. And he's seen everything, like Quandre Diggs said Thursday. He's been in the league for 10 years. He's seen every look the Seahawks can throw at him, but you got to mix and match. And I still think you've got to have a fairly heavy reliance on those 2 deep looks because of Russell Wilson's strength and his propensity for launching that deep ball. That's playing against some of the weaknesses that he has shown over an extended period of time. So I think that is certainly something that the Seahawks need to do in this game. There will be other games where more single high coverages will make sense, but I think this is a game where you do need to have that extra security blanket because of how good at throwing the deep ball Russell Wilson is. Up next, we're going to get to our X factors, what the Seahawks need to win, and our predictions. Who is going to win in tomorrow night's Monday night showdown at Lumen Field? We're going to get to all those things and more coming up in our final quarter on our Sunday special. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest college football and NFL developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting and wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, whether it's MLB, MMA, boxing, or golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Sunday pregame edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Joining me for tonight's show, Nick Lee. Thanks to all the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We just created a game plan for the Seahawks to beat the Broncos on Monday Night Football. Let's shift gears now, Nick. This is something we started doing a year ago. X factors. Every game, it doesn't matter if it's week 1, week 8, the Super Bowl, there's always going to be an X factor on the winning team. And I guess you could say X factors in the negative side on the losing team. But every winner is going to have a player that steps up and proves to be an X factor that's key to that victory. So who is your pick for Seattle's week 1 X factor? Which player do you tab that's going to have a big game in this game that maybe people aren't necessarily expecting?
Well, I'm not sure this is one that they're not expecting, but this is a player I think that can greatly hinge one way or the other how it goes, and that's Jamal Adams. We just mentioned, with the effect he can have on the game, he is a true game wrecker if he's being used right, and if he's in schematically in the right places at the right times. We saw in 2020 he made some enormous plays for the Seahawks all over the field, and last year generally ineffective when healthy. This year, in this game, like we mentioned, I think he's a great matchup to limit Russell Wilson, to spy on him if need be, rush the passer, those kind of things. But again, if he's ineffective, if it's looking a lot like 2021 with Jamal Adams, that's where Russell Wilson can really hurt you, and the defense is exposed and is not as effective and on their heels when Jamal Adams is not being used right. So. That's why I think that Jamal Adams is the X factor, because if he's on, it's going to be a huge boost to that defense and kind of maybe an equalizer to how good Russell Wilson is. And if he's bad, if he looks like 21, either ineffective or disappears, it's going to be a long night for the Seahawks defense.
Yeah, you went with the big name. I'm going to go with somebody that should be a bigger name based on his production the last 4 or 5 years with the Denver Broncos. I'm going outside the box a little bit here. Everybody's talking Russell Wilson coming back to Seattle, as they should, but he's not the only player where this is technically a revenge game. The Seahawks got a few veterans back as part of that blockbuster deal. Shelby Harris has been one of the most underrated defensive tackles in the NFL for a better part of half a decade. And he had kind of a slow start to his career, bounced around with a number of teams. He found a home in Denver. He's a great fit for the 3-4 defense, the Fangio-style defense the Seahawks are going to be playing this year much of the time. And he played for Fangio in Denver the last 3 years, excelled as a 3-tech, 4-eye technique rusher. He can defend the run. He gets his hand on the football, had a bunch of pass breakups in the line of scrimmage. Russell Wilson, with his height, when you have a defensive tackle that can do that, get his big paws up and swat the football away, one of those might pop up and land in one of his teammates' hands for a key interception. I just have a feeling that Shelby Harris going up against his former team, no hard feelings for being involved in that trade, but he wants to show them, hey, this is what you're missing on your defensive line, and I'm still a force to reckon with the defensive line. I just have a feeling that Shelby Harris is going to make a few big plays in this football game in the trenches that are going to help the Seahawks on defense and keep this game close. Really underrated player that's going to be a nice asset in this defense, and I think he's looking forward to the chance to play against his former team and play at a high level.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, he's Pro Football Focus has him at 32 pressures last year, plenty of disruption up the middle, and like it's been said with Russell Wilson, some of that interior rush could be a big factor. And if you got Shelby Harris humming along with Jamal Adams, might be some raised eyebrows come Monday night. We'll see.
All right, to our big question of the day here. We got our X factors. Nick, for the Seattle Seahawks to win this football game, what must happen? The Seahawks will win this game if.
I'll throw out two numbers, or two stats, I should say. And this is usually where I go for a team that maybe it isn't this crazy hugely, like Alabama versus, Western Carolina kind of underdog. But, NFL, good NFL size underdog. And that's be +2 in the turnover margin and rush for at least 150 yards. And being +2, that's 2 extra possessions. And when you're battling Russell Wilson and what we assume to be an explosive offense for the Broncos, stealing 2 possessions away would be huge. Or being, +2 in that category where it's, 1 turnover for you, 3 for them, that kind of thing, however it goes. And then 150 yards on the ground. That's, again, like I mentioned, controlling the clock, staying on schedule, and keeping Russell Wilson on the sidelines, long sustained drives. 150 yards chopped out like that could do that and really swing the game in your favor, at least keep the Broncos somewhat off rhythm. And the Seahawks were 3-1 last year when they reached the 150-yard rushing threshold. So that seems it's a bit of a bar there to reach for to really put the Seahawks in the driver's seat.
You mentioned 2 numbers. I'm going to mention 1 number. If the Seahawks are going to win this game, They need to convert 2 red zone trips minimum into touchdowns, and they need to create at least 2 turnovers. So you and I are in agreement on that turnover margin. I think the Seahawks need to create at least 2 to win this football game. And most importantly, they have to finish drives. You are not going to win this game if you are kicking a bunch of field goals or you're ending up just short of field goal range and then you got a punt from your 45-yard line or whatever. They need to finish drives, sustain them, and when they get in the red zone, you need to turn some of those opportunities, as many as you can, into 6 points. If you're stuck kicking field goals down there, you are not going to beat Russell Wilson. You're going to need a few turnovers to help aid your cause playing a superior football team. I think the Seahawks can certainly win this one, but they're going to need to create those turnovers, and they need to be efficient on third down and, most importantly, in the red zone. All right, last but not least, we've talked X factors. We've talked game planning, the main key to victory. Now the real question, who is going to win this football game? Week 1, Monday Night Football, Seahawks hosting the Broncos and Russell Wilson. Nick, do the Seahawks pull the upset, or does Russell Wilson leave the Pacific Northwest happy with his 58th win at Lumen Field?
Man, well, I'm going to say this, and it's not an indictment on the fans. I'm sure the fans are going to bring it, and, Lumen Field's going to be sparkling under Monday night. It always is. It's a great atmosphere. Unfortunately, I just think, like what we mentioned with the red zone trips turning 3 into 7 points, unfortunately, with how both of these teams last year were very good at red zone defense. I think they were 3rd and 4th respectfully. I don't remember exactly the order, but they were both teams top 5 in red zone efficiency on defense. So really it'll come down to who bends but doesn't break, who breaks less often on defense in the red zone and who can force the field goals. And unfortunately, I can see the Seahawks, having a field goal fest and, Jason Myers adding up some fantasy points. But unfortunately, that's not going to cut it against Russell Wilson and that kind of offense that they have in Denver. I'm going to go 30-16 Broncos. I just think I know it's a big score, but I think they're a bit outgunned, and I think that Russell Wilson, he's no dummy. This is a revenge game for him too. He's going to be uber motivated. Now we all hope, of course, that turns into him making some maybe mental mistakes, getting out of his game just because he's trying to prove himself so much, but. We've seen that mental edge he can have in games, and I think he's going to take this somewhat personally. And unfortunately, he might take it out on the Seahawks. I just think they're a bit outgunned. It's the first game for Geno Smith as the starter, week 1. So and I see this as a bit, I'm not saying it's, 30-7 until the Seahawks. I'd say, 23-16. The Seahawks are kind of mucking it up, and the Broncos maybe get a late touchdown to make it a bit more comfortable. But I do think the Seahawks will at least start out competitive.
I think this is going to be a very close game. I've been saying this for a couple weeks. I just get the feeling that, especially with it being week 1, Russell Wilson is going to be motivated, but Pete Carroll is going to be motivated. And that several of Seattle's defensive players like Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams, they're going to want to make a statement that this football team can still be competitive even without Russell Wilson. We want to prove that we're ready to rise back to the ranks of being a top 10 defense. You got guys like DK Metcalf on offense who are like, we can still win with Geno Smith. I just have a feeling that this is going to be a back and forth, low-scoring game. Broncos' first game with Russell Wilson at the helm. I think there's going to be some mistakes that are made because of that. Maybe down the road, this offense is going to be really potent, but I just have a feeling this is going to be a very defensive game in week 1, but I just don't think the Seahawks can pull it off. I think it's 23-20. I think a late field goal ends up clinching it. I think this is going to be a back-and-forth affair. I think both defenses are going to come up with some clutch plays, getting sacks, getting turnovers. There's going to be some miscues. I just think the Seahawks are going to make a few too many of them, not be quite efficient enough offensively to pull it off. But I expect this to be a very competitive, very close game. It's got a chance to be a Monday night classic in what is one of the most anticipated openers in recent memory. Just with the storyline of Russell Wilson coming back to town, I think Wilson leaves the victory. But unlike you, I'm seeing this being a much more back and forth affair that's going to go down to the wire just because I think Pete Carroll, that's what he expects. That's what the Seahawks team expects. And I just think it's going to be one of those week 1 games that's weird where the team that's the big underdog is going to keep it close. We'll see what ends up happening. We're all excited about it. The football season finally here. It's a game that everybody's been chatting about ever since the schedules came out back in May. Russell Wilson back in his old stomping grounds, going against the Seattle Seahawks as the quarterback of the Denver Broncos. Can they spoil his homecoming, or does Russell Wilson get another win in the Pacific Northwest? We will find out tomorrow night. As always, you can follow me on Twitter, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at Nick Lee 51. You can check out Locked On Seahawks and Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and streaming 5 days a week on YouTube. Coming up tomorrow night after the conclusion of Seahawks Broncos, I will be hosting a post-game show, going to hand out the game balls, key takeaways, turning points, and much more. You won't want to miss it. That will be coming shortly after the conclusion of tomorrow night's game. Enjoy the season opener. Thanks for listening. Go Hawks.